Welcome to another episode of This Week with Sabir. Today's guest is Michael F Schein. He is the founder and president of Microfame Media, marketing agency that specializes in making idea-based companies famous in their fields. Some of his clients have included, take this, it's eBay, Magento, Medici Group, University of Pennsylvania, Gordon College, and many, many more, LinkedIn, Citrix. His writing has appeared in Fortune, Forbes, Psychology Today, and Huffington Post. He is the author of this amazing book that I'm going to flash here called The Hype Handbook. It's available in print as well as as a Kindle. I'm a Kindle guy, so I actually got a copy of the Kindle. And thank you, Michael, for sending me an autographed copy. It's in the mail. I should be receiving it soon.
Absolutely.
It is available on Amazon, I believe, right, Michael?
It is indeed.
Okay. And so today's topic actually has to do with anatomy of hype. So we will talk about hype. But before we do, I don't know, Michael, I don't know what decade you're from, but I'm from the Public Enemy decade. So the famous song, Don't Believe the Hype. It was one of my favorite songs in the 90s when I was a kid at that time.
It's funny that you bring that up. So first of all, I love Public Enemy. We're from the same era. But it's funny, I actually got the term hype from hype artists in hip hop because, hype is so often considered a negative word, right? It's like you're hyping something up. That's horrible. But in hip hop, it's considered a positive. It's like there's a hype man in the group, like Flava Flav was the hype man. And I just always thought that was such a cool concept, that the buzz building was baked into the art itself. And that just really kind of led to me using that word and a lot of my interest. So it's funny that you bring that up.
Amazing. Flavor Flav, one of my favorite artists, and especially that Don't Believe the Hype was one of my favorite songs.
It's an awesome song.
Yeah. So let's, but before we jump into hype, what I would love to do is, because I started reading the book, and I encourage everybody to actually pick up a copy of the book and read it. You had a very interesting beginning, and in every one of my episodes with This Week with Sabir, I first want to get into your background and your where you came from and who you are and stuff like that, and how it led to, because that part of the journey is critical for people to understand. So I read it, but I want to hear it from in your words. So who are you? Where did you come from? Why did you decide to go on this journey?
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that, because I think, I wrote this handbook on essentially how to influence large numbers of people, right? I define hype as any activity, good, bad, or, in the middle, that allows you to generate enthusiasm and excitement and energy around a large group of people to get them to do what you want them to do. And it's really telling that a book like this was written by me, because I was terrible at sales, terrible at marketing, had no interest in business, didn't even know what sales and marketing were. So I was a very artsy, kind of nerdy kid, not in the computer science nerdy way, but comic books, and wanted to be a novelist. And if you had said to me that one day you'll own a business, I would have said, kill me now. That's my absolute nightmare, To me, business was accounting and spreadsheets and selling sheet metal or whatever business people, then wearing suits. And but I was always a bit of a sort of benevolent mischief maker. In school, we convinced the principal to let us wear our band t-shirts as a school club. We were always doing stuff like that. So when I left college, to my parents' utter dismay, I told them that I was going to go join a band and be in a band. And they were really upset about that, as I would have been too. And ultimately, I didn't become a rock star. That's pretty hard to do, but we probably did quite a bit better than anyone expected from us. I remember my dad said to me when I told him I was going to start a band, he goes, "Can you sing?" And I was like, "Not really." And he's like, "Are you a good guitar player?" I'm like, "I'm all right." And he's like, "And this is what you're going to do for a living?" But I was like, it's punk rock, and that's more about mischief making. So we did do better than people thought we would do. There's this club called Arlene's Grocery, and we would sell it out on a Wednesday night. It's a famous club. We were on TV. We were on the cover of the New York Press. And all of that came from, we would say, we're going to hype ourselves up. So like the TV example, we were on Showtime at the Apollo, and we knew we would be booed off. Like, we were the exact opposite of what anyone would like on that show, but it got us on in the press. So, you know, once that band broke up, I did get a job. I figured it was time to really get serious. And 8 years passed, you know, and I became a business person. I kind of slipped into it, but then started to do well. And in the first 3 years, I was learning. By year 8, I was completely miserable. So I left and I became a freelance copywriter because I was always a good writer. And I figured that if I could do some white papers, they paid a lot of money, you know, web copy, I would get a steady stream because I'm a good writer, right? And that didn't happen. I mean, I had a year's worth of savings. I burned through it. I read every marketing and sales book, did landing pages and learned about SEO and nothing, you know? I mean, I got some activity, but I just was really half broke all the time. And then I was walking past the club in New York that I used to play at, and I had just forgotten myself. I became this like professional, you know? And I just remember how good at marketing I was, but I never thought of it as marketing. We never considered it. It was just like hyping things up, you know? Mm-hmm. And I had this kind of revelation, like, what if I took that approach to my own career? And I did. And we can talk about the details, but I took a more mischievous, playful approach, drawn from non-marketers, and my writing business did really well. And then it turned into an agency. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of my story.
Oh, but you missed one part of it, though. What was that magical title in corporate America that actually pivoted you? You're going like, you know what? I'm never gonna do this.
You mean the vice president of solution development?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah. So I was just unhappy, and I was just, you know, I wanted to be a novelist and do great things, start a record label. And I was, you know, my wife at the time, she got pregnant with my daughter, who's now 10 years old. And I just remember having this very bleak vision of like my daughter taking me to career day and me saying, I'm a vice president of solution development. And I was working like a dog weekends, and I still have no idea what that title means. Like I was like, this is what I'm doing with my life, you know, a vice president of solution development. So I quit a couple weeks after I had that realization. Yeah.
So when you look at a word like hype, right? It has a very kind of a negative connotation to it, right? I mean, unless you're like child of 90s like me with Public Enemy, you know that's what it stands for and what it stands for. But why not use words like marketing or promotion, you know, and instead use the term hype? How do you distinguish between them?
It's a good question. So, you know, as I said before, I define hype as any set of activities that gets people emotional enough to take an action that you want them to take. But why not use marketing? Well, in a perfect world, that's what marketing would be, right? You would think that's what it is. It's getting people to do what you want them to do, buy from you. But it so often isn't. And I think I learned that lesson from the corporate world. Like I reported directly to the chief marketing officer, and she was a great boss. But when I left, I could not apply those strategies to marketing myself because it was all about technology and branding and all of these very like abstract concepts, or else in the digital marketing world, it's about tactics. People focus on HubSpot and A/B testing and all of this. And those are really, really, really important tools. They're vital, vital tools, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if you don't understand the psychological principles, the mass psychology principles that get people to behave a certain way, all the tweets and backlinks in the world will not get people to part from their money or get them to take or donate to your cause or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So the 90s thing is important. I mean, hip hop, you know, hype is considered a negative in most communities, but hip hop was born in the South Bronx, which was the poorest neighborhood in America. And now there are 2 billionaires in hip hop, and the hip hop community has always embraced hype because no one was handing them anything on a silver platter. It was like, listen, we're in the most disadvantaged area in America. We have a lot going against us. We got to do whatever it takes. We have to get very, very creative. So I think about the Wu-Tang Clan, who had nothing, going around posting a W all over every light post at eye level in Staten Island. Like, that's awesome hype. Is it marketing? I don't know, maybe, but that's not how most of us is. Marketing has become a little bit corrupted in how people think to it. And I just wanted to take a break from that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had guests on the show with the experiences that they have had. They talked about quantitative marketing versus qualitative, right? And also research goes hand in hand with that, right? Quantitative is very much Google Analytics, it's Google Ads, it's clicks, it's visits, is the traffic coming into your store, how many people are standing in line to check out, how many tickets did you sell, very much hardcore numbers. Qualitative are things that lead to kind of brand awareness, and you're building your brand equity that has a very organic feel to it that keeps on paying you dividends. Like, for example, believing in Apple, right? And regardless of what Apple brings out to the market, if you're a believer in Apple, you'll buy whatever they come up with it. You don't care. Right. If they come up with the next iWallet, and that's technically it's like a leather wallet, you'll go and buy it.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to Macy's and pick up a leather wallet. You're going to go buy it from Apple if you're the believer of that. So that's the hype part of it. I believe that's the brand equity that brands build up over time that keeps on paying dividends. And it's not like you're paying Facebook or Google every click that they send to your site, or to your business.
I think that's very true. And I would add to that, and you can tell me what you think about this, because you're a very talented quantitative marketer. I feel like, when you're building a building, when you go to build, I don't know, a skyscraper, if you don't know engineering, the math of engineering, if you don't know how to use cranes and diggers and soldering irons, you can't build a building. That building will fall down. It won't get up. At the same time, if you start with that stuff, you're never going to have the Chrysler Building or the Empire State Building. So in other words, quantitative is vital. Those are the tools. You need that stuff. But quantitative around what? In other words, I'll see people saying, I understand the tools. I knew this guy once. He was young, and he was so sure that he was a great marketer because he read all the books and knew all the tools. And so he would put out these like ads that were just bad. They had no understanding of psychology, but he thought because he could look at analytics, that he understood it. But it was like, let's first start with like how brains of human beings in mass respond to things. And then let's use the best tools possible to get there. I mean, would you agree with that? I'd actually like to put that to you because you're such a good quantitative marketer.
The analogy that everybody uses, and I'm going to tell you my version of that analogy, right? Think outside the box. I'm sure that you've heard that before, right? Yeah. What I tend to say, and this is highly relevant to what you just said, right? When you think about anything to do with the box, you're in the comfort of the box. Whether Correct. You're outside the box or inside the box or around the box, you're in the comfort of the box, right? So when it comes to what I say, and what I say to everyone on my team throughout my career, whoever has worked with me, is I blew up the box. There is no comfort zone around the box.
There is no box. Yeah, that's interesting.
There is no box.
Yeah.
Don't get comfortable. Don't lean against it. Right. Even though you're outside, you could be leaning against it still. Don't do that. When people come from certain skill sets, right? What has made me successful? I'll tell you what that is. When I got involved in the fashion industry, for example, the innovation I brought into fashion industry came from the vitamin industry, supplements industry. Right. The things that I brought into vitamins industry, I brought it from selling financial subscription businesses, right? In those other environments, what I had done was incredibly innovative that nobody had thought about. Because you know why that happens, Michael? Because people stay in that box, in that lane, in that industry fashion people hire people from the fashion industry. Everybody stays in this kind of a nice closed space, very comfortable. And whenever they talk, the language seems to be very similar to each other.
Right.
They understand each other and they go like, oh yeah, we need to do that, right? But someone like me, an oddity that comes out of nowhere, and says, oh, we need to do this. You go like, wow, that's new. We never thought about it that way, and that's where like innovation comes from, like other aspects, not just quantitative, right? A lot of people, given whoever has followed me throughout my career, thinks that I am a heavy duty analytical, which I am, by the way. I don't want to shy away from it.
And that's important. It's vital. Yeah.
However, I also know the organic side of the equation, the brand equity, the brand awareness, building a story around the brand is so important.
And they're integrated. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's a line between them in the way some people present. I think without the strong, clever hype or marketing or whatever you want to call it, the quantitative means nothing. And if you can't distribute stuff on a wide scale and track it closely, the other stuff is less, has less impact.
Or, there are a ton of brands I can talk to you about that are heavily dependent on advertising dollars they're paying to Facebook and Google. And they're at the mercy because they never invested on the qualitative side of the equation.
So they have no brand, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Something as simple as email marketing and search engine optimization and things of that nature. Producing content that has to do with you, right, as a brand and who you are. What is your POV? Yeah, but everybody sells these dresses and they're all in the fashion business and they're retailing. How are we any different? Well, do you have a perspective into the fashion that you're collecting and that you're putting in front of people?
Right.
If the answer is it's a commodity, then it doesn't matter if you're in luxury or not. Exactly. You're a commodity retailer. It doesn't matter if the price tag on that dress is $10,000. It wouldn't matter.
I agree. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. There are definitely 12 indispensable. That's how you said it in the book. 12 indispensable strategies related to hype, right? And each one of those chapters is pretty deep dive into. You did quite a lot of work around it. So what was the research like when you were coming up with the book?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the research, and it was hard. It unfolded over a long period of time. So when I first figured out that I could market things a new way, that I could be a bit of a trickster. That's not the right word. I mean, that's a term from the book, but a hype artist, but do it in an ethical and benevolent way. I said, how can I learn more about this? I needed a competitive edge. All of my, contemporaries and competitors were doing what you did, which is useful, learning how all the tools work, understanding the math and the analytics. And I wasn't that guy, and it wasn't giving me an advantage. So I said, what advantage do I have? And I said, well, what if I look at people throughout history who, even before there were barely books, when people were writing on scrolls, were getting tons of attention. I mean, whatever, just anyone. And let me see if I can figure out from books about them, from interviews, whatever, if there are some things kind of like what you said about the vitamin industry being applied to the fashion. What if there are things from those other worlds I can apply to my copywriting business and then to my marketing agency, and then let me do the smallest possible experiment to see if it works. So I sort of did my version of like the Ryan Holiday note card method. I would read these books and take notes on them and then organize them into themes. And I would find that like rock managers and cult leaders and business people did things, even though the content was very different, what they did was the same. But then the next thing I would do experiments in my own career, and some things worked and some didn't. So it wasn't a book at first. It was just how I organized, my own career and my own marketing. And then from there, I started writing articles about it. I was writing for Forbes and Inc. and Psychology Today. And then it became a book. So a lot of the research was already done. The writing, then I had to take it and write a book out of it. But I was lucky because I had been doing the research for like 5, 6, 7 years beforehand.
Can you think of like one like really solid example of like ethical person who has utilized hype in a positive way, right? And it has definitely helped them. It could be a person, it could be a brand that has done an amazing job of using ethical hype, to really promote their brand.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, I didn't even hesitate because probably America's ethical standard of a person was really a very good hype artist. And that is not meant to denigrate him. It was part of his success. And it was Martin Luther King, when there's a famous picture of a dog biting a young protester, and there's a cop like holding the leash. And things like that happened all the time. However, that particular moment, that was not happening the way it was seen. That guy on purpose stepped in front of the dog, and the cop was one of the good cops that day, was pulling the dog away from him. But it looked like he was sicking the dog onto him. And Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy, who was his kind of lieutenant, saw someone take a picture of that because he had told people, put yourself in harm's way because the media is here. You know what I mean? So when that happened, Ralph Abernathy looked at Martin Luther King and went, we got it, and that's become one of the defining images of the civil rights movement. So why I think that was extremely ethical is that these things were actually happening. People were being beaten up. People were being attacked by dogs. But what Martin Luther King and his inner circle were savvy enough to know is that in the modern age, none of that mattered unless it was framed and captured properly, that everything is theater, especially when there are cameras everywhere. Theater, weaving a story, weaving a narrative, having it be about one person rather than 20,000 is everything. And that really worked. And what you can do to think about that in business is, that's what people mean when they say storytelling. It's not this weird concept that it's a cliche now, storytelling in marketing. People tell a story about their bleach, What they're saying is that everyone views life in stories. So if you have a customer, that person is the protagonist in their own story. You're not. I mean, Apple's not a protagonist. Apple is the accessory or the tool or whatever that makes you be able to see yourself as a certain person, right? Kind of person. Mm-hmm. So the more you can think theatrically, the way Martin Luther King did and a lot of other people, it goes a long way.
Yeah, that's actually number 10, right? Embrace theater and drama.
Yeah.
That's actually this one I wanted you to kind of take a deeper dive into. Your number 11, it says set down a rock for your followers to cling to. You want to go into more detail there?
Sure. So I actually quoted Jesus. I have these little quotes at the top of every chapter, and he says pretty famously to Peter, who became Saint Peter. I'll get it wrong, but it's like, "Let me call you Peter, my rock, that I can build my church."
By the way, I'm the wrong person to correct that. So hopefully somebody watching this, if they want to correct you, they'll put it in the comments section.
I quoted it properly in the book, but this Jewish boy, knows, he's quoting Jesus. But in any case, the idea is that, and religions have done this for years, life is really hard. I mean, it has its great moments and it can be really fulfilling. But the thing about life, and I don't mean to be depressing, but it's true, and the older you get, the more you realize this, anything that you take as a given can go away. And in the end, it usually does. You can love somebody and eventually you'll experience heartbreak. People will leave you. People you love will die. You will get sick. So it's really, when we're children, we think, unless we've had a horrible childhood, we think that things are very solid. Our parents are going to be here forever, this and that, and things go away. So, and that's really, really stressful and traumatic for human beings to face. So if you can create something that's unchanging, that people can just grab onto no matter what, That's extremely powerful. And that works on very large scales and very small scales. Like, so on a large scale, it would be something like creating a religion or building a church, but it can be work on a lot of levels. Like, think about the business books that do really, really well, like in consulting businesses. Everyone's writing business books, right? I mean, they write books about, I don't know, whatever. I remember Google Plus for dummies, you know, or whenever that was big, or management strategies for the 21st century. And they're all great, right? But the books that are legendary, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a Bible. It implies if you follow these
Stephen
7
Covey.
habits. What's that?
Stephen Covey.
Yeah, exactly. And he's made an empire on it, built an empire on that rock. It's like, I have some doubt on which path to take. Open up the Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, not some highly effective people. It's these 7 habits will tell you exactly how to become a highly effective person. Or even on like a more unimportant level, there's, I talk about this in the book. There's a guy who, he was a golf manager. Early on, he was Arnold Palmer's golf manager. They went to college together. And you know, he ended up building IMG, which is like this massive entertainment management agency. And he did a lot of things to do that. But one of the things he did, he created this golf ranking system. So the thing about golf is it's not like basketball or baseball. Every course is different, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity in golf. So you need a ranking system that works. So he's like, this is the ranking system, and no one questioned him. And they, you know, even when there was an example where someone who was an obviously top golfer who wasn't managed by him didn't get ranked highly, and for a few minutes people called it into questions, but because he established himself as this arbiter of what is, you know what I mean, what is steady, what is good golf, people just follow him. He just said it. And it was. So there's something to that. You say something with authority, and you say something. This certification system shows you that you're the digital marketer, digital marketing black belt. If you get in early enough, people will believe it. You shouldn't lie, but people will look to you as the man in the white coat or woman in the white coat, even just because you said so, even if you don't have a degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's also this is one of the reasons why brands also get a patent on certain things.
Yeah, that's
right?
a great point. Yeah.
You know, when there is a patent on a product or an ingredient or something like that, or a process even, it says that that means quality or whatever it comes with that patent, that anybody who doesn't have that mark lacks it, right? So if it doesn't have it, that means that it's missing something. It's not. You know, so that's I think the patenting of whether it's process, design, anything like that, I think plays a role in that too. You know,
you bring up a great point, because at the end of it all of these things were invented by human beings. Like, sure, there's a rigorous process to get a patent, but once a couple hundred years ago, some flesh and blood person came up with the idea of a patent. But we treat these things like they're laws of physics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just how our brains work. It's why a book works. It's why I have this book, this Bible. Well, you must be an expert. Okay. We're just funny that way. It comes down to heuristics. You know, human beings are bombarded with a lot of information all the time. So at a certain point, we need mental shortcuts to make decisions, or else we would just become very overloaded. We couldn't function. And there are ways to play with those heuristics, those mental shortcuts.
I think also, not to get religious, but it's interesting in our human history, right? How we have used, like in the beginning when we had a religion, right? You have the 10 Commandments.
Right.
10 Commandments implies that certification, right? Implies
100%.
a pious person, right? A person who is religious and a pious person follows these 10 Commandments, for example. And every religion has whether you're
which are
Buddhist,
literally etched in rock. They're etched in stone, right? That's not an accident. Yeah, but go on. I'm sorry.
No, that's kind of a certification, right? And it's interesting that when you move forward to, and I don't want to compare religious figures to influencers, but influencers also have followers, followers in their religion, in their version of the religion. Whether it's a dietary plan, right? If you're a vegan, you follow a certain influencer, and you believe everything he or she says to you, and you follow their recipe. If somebody, someone like Tony Robbins, talks about whether you as a personality, or you as a business person, or you as a human being, how you should act in a certain way. Oprah had a very successful show on TV for many, many years, and she's selling because of that brand she had built. Even now, if Oprah says that I'm endorsing this product, that's an endorsement of a certain quality that goes with it too.
Yeah.
And I think the word religion is not just limited to the Old Testament, New Testament, Holy Quran, but Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that. Those are very traditional texts, right? But also in today's society, like you said, it is a form of religion, right? Whether you have more Microsoft certification, that's religion. That's part of that marketing, and that's part of that hype.
I think the principles are exactly the same. I would go so far, and I'm not saying that whether certain religions are true or not true. That's besides the point. But every religion started as a cult, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. Literally, the definition of a cult is a small group of people, who have religious belief, and it's become something else. So which cults turned into religions? And again, cult is in the subtitle. It's the ones who understood the psychology of viral growth, of spread, of hype, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm sure for some religious people, they would say, no, it's the ones that were most true. Well, not really, because there's more than one. That's huge. And only one of them can be true, right? So it's entirely the same. Human beings' brains work the same. It doesn't matter if it's about a God-oriented thing or a software-oriented thing. The underlying principles are the underlying principles. If anything, that's the whole point of the book. It's to make that case.
So if we were to actually, I want to talk about one topic briefly. That is the negative side of it, actually.
Yeah.
I want to talk about it briefly, and then we want to jump into, I want to give practical ideas for our viewers so that they can take it and start based on the 12 principles or 12 hype strategies that you recommend in the book. It's the negative side of it, right?
Yeah.
When you actually have because I've read a lot of books on, you mentioned cult following, but also when there are very negative movements in human history, right? Starting from Satan and Adam and Eve, all the way down to like the realities of Nazism and massacres that have happened throughout human history and continue to happen even today. And also mass movements where we just saw it this past. We saw two different types of movements. One, actually three. Let's talk about three different types, three different movements, right? And I hope that hopefully don't get flagged for saying these things on this YouTube video, right?
I think I know where you're going with this, but let's
there were three major movements, right? One was Black Lives Matter, right? And for all the right reasons that why it happened and stuff like that. Everybody has their own perspective into. One side says we are right, and the other person says we are right, and the truth is somewhere in the middle there.
That's what I think.
The number two is the Capitol riots. So that was a second one, and the third one actually I just started watching on HBO Max. There's a limited series. There are only 2 episodes up right now. It's supposed to be 6-part. Is about actually QAnon.
Which is very tied to the Capitol riots, right? Yeah.
Yep. So, and then how, and also it also goes into how it's different from that too.
Okay.
I watched 2 episodes because that's what was there. I'm still waiting for the other 4 episodes to come out, and it's interesting that when you have something like that where things start, and even in a very smaller way. I don't know if you read about Reddit and GameStop. And how that brought down major hedge funds against GameStop with retail traders. That's another version of that. Of a very similar kind of
question. Yeah.
Yep. So what are your thoughts about those things? I mean, there are some negatives and positive movements in there, but I just want to talk about generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you're hitting the nail on the head, because my interest has always been, if something can get that many people worked up and jacked up and spread that widely, you can either say to yourself, "Oh, that's horrible. I don't want anything to do to that," or you can look at it like with a curiosity and say, "Okay, I totally disagree with what they're saying," or even I think what they're saying is evil, or there's no substance there, it's garbage. But then how did it spread? If it's such garbage, how did all of these human beings, so many, make this happen? And you could say to yourself, well, those people are stupid. Are they? Because I could come out, not I, because I know a little bit about this stuff, but a normal person could say, oh, I want to get a junk stock and get thousands of people to buy it so that it's highly valued, and they wouldn't get anywhere, So what is it psychologically, specifically from the mass psychology perspective, that's getting that to happen? And what you'll find is that the substance doesn't matter. In other words, whether it's QAnon or the civil rights movement or Black Lives Matter or the Reddit thing or Nazism, those details are so different. But the underlying mechanisms, when you pull off all the onion skins, they're playing on the exact same cognitive biases and wanting to be part of something bigger and being tribal in nature and all of this. So to me, it's like, okay, the bad guys already get it. What if we could study the underlying mechanisms and reapply those strategies and tools to good causes? Because good people often struggle a little bit more with what I call hype, because they let their emotions get in the way. Which is really great. I'm like that by nature, but it doesn't, I don't know. I don't want to play games. I don't this, I don't that. I'm nervous. Whereas a psychopath or a sociopath, doesn't have those qualms. They just do what needs to be done. So if you could take the best parts and understand the psychology and apply them to good stuff, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I was actually, while you were saying that, I was thinking sense of purpose and belonging, right? I think
100%. Yes.
Those two things, like sense of purpose, meaning that, let's say if I don't have a purpose and now somebody's saying something that sounds right, it could be a purpose that I want to follow, right? There were so many cults in the 90s. You remember with the sneakers, they all committed suicide altogether.
Yeah.
That, I mean, if you think about it from a logical perspective, you go like, why would something like that ever happen? But the thing is, it's like there's a sense of purpose, and then being part of that mix is now I have a sense of belonging, that I belong to that group, right? I was part of that group XYZ that did whatever, XYZ, whatever happened. I was part of the group that I'm not saying that I was part of it. I'm not professing here anything.
Yeah.
Like Reddit, that I was involved in the GameStop thing that caused the thing, and that it caused so much mass losses for hedge funds, for example. Like it's that sense.
Yeah, and they feel a pride with exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or even Black Lives Matter, that I went out and I protested. I protested against this kind of police brutality, against the authority and things of that nature, right? So I think those two words just kept on resonating as you were saying that. It's like sense of belonging and then having a purpose, or whatever that purpose is. Somebody from the outside, it has no meaning to it, but people who are in the inside or on the edge, they actually see it as a worthwhile purpose, and they follow that purpose.
Well, I think a real tactical takeaway from what you're saying is to come up with a label, because, you look at Gary Vaynerchuk, who's very good at this kind of thing, and he's got all these young kids who follow him, and whether they follow his advice and become millionaires, I don't know. But what's significant is they call themselves Vayniacs, And if you mess with their man, they're going to come at you with all they've got. They're so into this stuff, right? And I think, Lady Gaga calls her fans little monsters. It's like people want to be part of a tribe because that gives them purpose, right? And there's an underbelly to this, right? That's what a lot of these white power movements are about. It's like, I lost my factory job. I don't really have much purpose, but I'm white. I'm part of this ancient race of like noble Europeans, right? And that's very sinister. But you can use that same dynamic, like you're saying, for something very positive that, I don't know, the ice bucket challenge. I participated in the ice bucket challenge. I was vaccinated, and you have your little badge that you put up. I'm a Vaniac, whatever.
I voted.
I voted. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you can actually take some of those kinds of things. Like if you remember in the computing revolution, right? It was PC versus Mac, right?
They did a great job with that.
PC versus Mac, and the two people that you associated with those two battlefields, right, or the two armies, was Steve Jobs on one side and then Bill Gates on the other side. You put a person behind it, right, and they became the icon of those two. I don't have those two people right now in the current technology, evolution. I cannot put up those two people.
They haven't. No.
I've not seen it. I mean, I do see someone like Elon Musk, and what he's doing is phenomenal, right?
And he's created this heroic image, which is a little bit different, but it's
is it Jeff Bezos? The answer is no, not really.
No.
Is it Mark Zuckerberg? No. Like, so who is it? Like, if on one side of it, if I put Elon Musk, who's the other guy on the other side would put, and why would I put them against each other?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, Mac did a good job of that. Apple did a good job of that in their advertising, right? Like they personified those two personas. They had Justin Long as the artsy, cool, hippie kind of guy, which is Steve Jobs. And then they had John Hodgman with fat mustache, slacks, nerdy, and that was brilliant because subconsciously, whether they agreed with it or not, everyone who wanted to see themselves as cool and hip and artistic, which is most people, even if they're not, was like, oh, I want to get a Mac, right? I don't want to be a PC. I don't want to be the PC. I don't want to be nerdy Bill Gates. I want to be cool Steve Jobs and Justin Long.
That cost me. I'll tell you this. It cost me, and I'll tell you how it cost me. I was on the Windows camp with Bill Gates, right?
Were you?
When and this is how the mentality is so ingrained in you when you're part of one side or the other. When Steve Jobs was brought back to Apple, let's say if I had this much of a doubt of maybe I'm not going to be absolutely right, maybe this could actually benefit me financially, if I had put in $10,000 into Apple stock, which was ready to go bankrupt, and Bill Gates had actually put in money into the company to float it, right? That $10,000 would be multi-million dollars right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people were right there with you. I remember going in, and I was pretty young. I remember going into a computer store in the mall and seeing the first Mac, not even laptops. They were like the first MacBooks, those like really the blue and white, the original iMacs,
Yep.
And
the first iMac when Steve Jobs came back.
The first one he came back.
The translucent ones.
The translucent one. And I remember saying to someone, because Apple was terrible at the time, I was like, these look pretty cool, but I'm like, this is going to bomb. There's not even a floppy drive. Like, how are you supposed to, how are you supposed to transfer files?
You were thinking about it as a technician coming from Windows, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I was like, what are you supposed to do without an A drive,
Yeah. So let's give like three. First, I want to give three solid strategies to our listeners and viewers, because this does get into podcasts, so there are listeners too. Three solid ideas that if they're entrepreneurs, let's say they have their personal brand because they're the founder of the company, they have their company, and then they have their product, right? Those are three different things in my view, right? How would you go about utilizing the 12 strategies or three top ones that you would recommend? And after you answer that, what I would love for you to do is in the final, like, let's say 5 minutes, if you could jump into and give your $100,000 expert insight into building hype.
Yeah. So I think if you take nothing away from this, but the idea that we're tribal and you have to play on that tribalism, that's the most important thing you can learn. So in the book, I call this hype strategy, make war, not love. I don't have chapters in the book. I have hype strategies, and that's one of them. And it's a function of how do you do that? You know, people are more attracted to division than you telling them how great you are. How do you do that in a productive way? Well, I would write down and ask myself the question, what is something in my corner of the universe, in my industry, a point of view that people tend to believe like it's gospel that I actually disagree with? What's my soapbox moment? And I'll give you an example. Basecamp, the software, the project management software, you know, at the time, project management, it's not a really exciting thing. They were big, complicated software packages that you use to manage your complicated projects in a complicated way. And everyone thought complicated was good because it had lots of functionality, you know?
Yeah.
And Jason Fried and DMM, David Heinemeier, they hated that. They hated the idea of over complexity and overwork. And so they went out and they just constantly beat that drum of like, fire your workaholics, get simple, fire, you know, like be simple, stop doing this. And as a result, this simple tool, Basecamp, just became extremely successful. So figure out that fight that you want to pick with an idea and really build your stuff around that.
Michael, the book Rework by Jason Fried is a phenomenal book.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
Yeah.
And it's even more clever than most people think, because even though it's a great book just to read on its own merits, think about what he did. That book talks about everything we just said, you know, fire your workaholics, have this streamlined system. But what does that do? He didn't write a book about why project management software should be simple. He wrote a book about why work should be simple. But what's the logical extension? Buy my product that is the simplest way to manage your work. It was brilliant. And it's a great book. Yeah. I would say another important thing is something I call the piggybacking principle, or creating a secret society. You talked about influencers, and I think there's this conception that anyone who gets really influential, whether it's as a YouTube influencer or in any other way, they painstakingly build a grassroots following. They just hit the right combination of content and TikToks and whatever that gets people to follow them. And what I've observed is that the savviest people, they make it seem like all of their success comes from grassroots, and some of it does, but they spend just as much time or even more building an extensive, I wouldn't even call it a network. It's like a friendship group under the surface with people who scratch each other's backs, who have a lot of power. You know what I mean? So it's much better to align yourself with 10 people who have massive followings, who you can give stuff to them that's cheap for you to give up, but valuable to them. You help their kids out. You feature them in an article, whatever, you know, something you can give them. Every great quote unquote hype artist that I've seen does that, and they don't talk about it because it's not as exciting as grassroots. And then we mirror them, their grassroots approach, without knowing what's really going on. And yeah, a third one is something that I call, and I didn't make this up, it's used by religions. It's give the babies their milk before you give them their meat. What that means is that in religions, if you know, babies can't digest meat, obviously. So you have to give them milk to work up to the meat. And the way that plays out in religion is that if you walk up to, all religions are weird, all of them. They're about people walking on water and chariots of fire and whatever. So anyone who's not used to that stuff's going to be put off by it. So what religions will do, especially new ones, is they'll come in with stuff that's more similar to the experience you've actually had. So like Scientology believes that aliens on the lip of a volcano implant the evil thoughts in our head, right? But they never approach people with that. They use the language of self-help. They talk about auditing your negative thoughts to give you, you know, more personal power, right? So what I would say is, whatever you're doing, think about who you're talking to and roll out your new ideas in stages. So like, I think defund the police is some of the worst branding that I've ever heard. And I'm not going to talk about whether I agree with it or not. That has nothing to do with it. But people were very sympathetic with that cause after the George Floyd thing. You could have said something like, bring back serve and protect, because people like being protected by the police, but they don't like police brutality. So since we all like having a society protected by police, bring a term they're familiar with, serve and protect, and give the message that people aren't living up to that. Saying defund the police, that's like saying we're going to strip all the money from the police, whether that's true or not. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Even if that's the right plan, that's such a big change from the way we do things that it's almost destined to fail. You know, so think about meeting people where they are, to use the common parlance, but babies can't digest meat right away. You know, big change scares people, especially for new ideas.
Yeah, and you cannot like jump the journey either, right? You have to take people on a journey. One of the things that I recommend to marketers is that when they are working on, for example, digital, right? Digital is like it's a siloed, right? You know, you're on Facebook, you're on email, you do these kinds of things, like very disconnected, right? It's not analog, it's disconnected. That's why it's called digital.
Right.
But how do you tie those things together if you create a flow that connects those things together, right?
With small linkages, right? Exactly.
Small linkages, and drop those breadcrumbs along the way, because somebody is going to check their email, but they're going to check their Facebook then, and then Instagram, then they might go on Twitter, then they go back to their email, they go to another website, they check the news. How do you create that as a link? The marketers actually who follow that recommendation, they actually get they start seeing huge results from that strategy. To your point, like if you tell them like, you can just jump, what happens? People think that this is what's going on with every YouTube video that's out there, right? You go like, the magical solution is for you to do Facebook advertising, right?
Exactly.
So people take their money and put it into Facebook advertising, to exactly what you're saying. Like, they're just jumping. They're not like taking. You know, when I went to college, right? If the first class was 101 level class,
right,
the college would never, or university would never allow me to take a course that was 501. Why is it that when we get out of school and education and stuff, that we think that we can jump the line like that? You know,
we're impatient. We're impatient. But on the messenger is impatient. But the person receiving the message, our brains are literally set up to be very scared of big changes. I mean, think about like in an ancient environment, in a primeval environment, if everything suddenly turned orange and red, that's a fire, you know? But if things slowly turn to orange and red, you don't even notice it. It's fall. That's how fall unravels. It's big change meant danger. So our brains are set up to hate big change. So especially in messaging. So it's not a great way to learn and acquire new skills, because our brains aren't set up that way. But it's a really bad way to get people to buy into what you're selling.
Yeah, I mean, actually, while you were saying that, what came to my mind was sun eclipse. Right there,
100% right, versus night slowly happening. Yeah, exactly. If things turned dark right now, like suddenly turned dark, people would be running around with no warning. People would go crazy. They'd think it was the end of the world. And religious people will
start praying, going like it's the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what is, Michael, so give us the number one recommendation that you have for not only building up a hype, but also making it viral, and so that it continues into this infinite loop for a long time. What is that number one recommendation? $100,000 on the line.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to the make war, not love, because all of this stuff works together and it's all interconnected. But if you do all these other tactics, if you build this big secret society, if you wrap your messages in familiar concepts, if you use theater, what are you wrapping it around? You know, it's kind of like hey, I'm going to blog, I'm going to tweet, I'm going to do now the new thing, Clubhouse, I'm going to use landing pages, I'm going to do analytics around what, so like Simon Sinek has start with why, and he's just constantly hammering that. And that's a contrarian point of view. He's saying everyone else starts with what, starts with the tactics, I start with why. Figure that thing out, test it, and see if it resonates, and then relentlessly beat it over the head. Because if you don't have that, the rest of it means nothing.
Then you're just going through the motions.
You're just going through the motions.
All
you're just doing activity.
There is no purpose then in that scenario.
Exactly.
You're missing the purpose, the very purpose of your existence,
But people do that all day. It seems like common sense, but people make that mistake all day long.
Michael, thank you for being part of the show. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom. And for all of our viewers, hopefully by Saturday, there will be a very detailed article that goes with this interview that I'll be publishing too, so that you can dive deeper into that. Definitely what I would recommend for everyone to do is go on Amazon. This is the book. It's called The Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Success Secrets. Definitely pick the book up. I picked it up and it's really good. And Michael, really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thanks, Sabir. Such great questions. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And thank you for